Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at the Jaquet Droz Grande Seconde SUW, 45mm in ceramic and polished stainless steel. You can buy this Jaquet Droz on our website, watchyouwant.com. And if you like these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Watch You Want Inc. Now you can see on my wrist, 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference. This watch wears as every millimeter of its 45mm rated diameter. The watch is a lot like a 44mm Royal Oak Offshore in that the strap conforms completely to the spot where it joins the case flank, so there's no gap between the end of the strap and the flank of the case, and this adds rigidity to the strap. You can see how it wants to flare out on both sides. So 45mm rated diameter, it wears at least that large on the wrist. It's also 14.5mm thick, and you can see that the design is heavily buttressed on its sides at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And I'm going to give you an even better view of that, but it's actually hollowed out so that these buttresses are separate from the flanks of the case. And the same design, a sort of architectural girder extending out to both sides, is evident in the hollowed out lugs themselves. The watch wears with a lot of presence on the wrist, and those who have heard of the Jaquet Droz brand might know that it belongs to the Swatch Group. It was relaunched in 2002 after well over 2 centuries essentially of dormancy, and it became the avant-garde high horology brand of Swatch Group, specializing in unique materials, in outrageous, outlandish automata, in aggressive designs. And in 2008, the company really came into its own as a brand with the launch of the SUW, because during the mid-2000s, we had a sport utility everything. We had sport utility wagons, sport utility watches, and of course, everyone's favorite, the oversized four-wheel drive brush guard equipped sport utility vehicle. Well, by 2012, the world had sobered up a bit, and so had the sport utility watch, becoming the Grande Seconde SW, no longer sport utility watch, just SW. And this particular model debuted with a combination of a black gloss ceramic bezel and a stainless steel high polish case. Now the watch has the distinctive outline and essential dial layout of the ancestral Jaquet Droz pocket watches from the 18th century. So you have the large separate second subdial and then the hours and the minutes at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock we'll call it on the dial, with most of the dial space actually devoted to an empty area. So it's very distinctive in its look, but it's definitely an aggressive take on that. Now within the Swatch Group, Jaquet Droz uses movements that are crafted by Frédéric Piguet, so essentially Blancpain. The main distinction between them is the standard of decoration, which is more industrial, which is more technically inspired on the Jaquet Droz SW than just about any Blancpain short of the L Evolution. Now you do see the ruthenium PVD bridges of the Jaquet Droz 2663 automatic movement. It's based on the Frédéric Piguet 1150 twin barrel 68-hour power reserve. This is a high horology movement. This is not an ETA. This is not a Valjoux or Unitas-based movement. This comes from the top shelf of Swatch's in-house movements, and the finishing is to that standard. Gorgeous linear Côte de Genève across all bridges. They do have that distinctive darker PVD coating to them to give them more of a machine ethic, but the standard of the rounded, hand-executed anglage is mirror polished, very nice. A tight and even perlage on the base plate, which for contrast is rhodium plated as opposed to ruthenium, and you can see that the Côte de Genève striations are beautifully textured, linear, parallel, wonderfully executed. Now there is dressage circular on the wheels that are visible, as well as radial on the twin mainspring barrels, which you can see poking out from under the bridges right under my thumb here. Everything's to a very high standard, and it really suits a group that sits alongside Breguet and Blancpain at the top of the Swatch brand pyramid. But Jaquet Droz has made its name not so much with fine finish on its movements as expressive, unusual material combinations and large cases. I would say more than any other Swatch group, Jaquet Droz is probably positioned to go head-to-head with Hublot. Now, while Hublot doesn't have quite the high horology pedigree that Jaquet Droz has with the movements, what kind of unites the two, unifies their company vision, is the fact that both of them owe almost nothing, I'm going to be honest, to the past. When you have no recent history, you can sort of create your own story, and that's what Jaquet Droz has done. By combining steel, by combining ceramic, by combining rubber, they've created a very aggressive aesthetic that's completely unrelated to anything in the Blancpain catalog, in the Breguet catalog. By drawing on the essential layout characteristics of the historic Jaquet Droz watches, they have just enough of a starting point around which to craft a highly technical, entirely modern timepiece. This is not a timepiece so much for sentimentality, but it does have the traditional attention to detail in its finish, where this really sets itself apart from an Hublot, because they both have the size, they both have, I think, the audacity and the boldness to them, but where this sets itself apart is in the finish, in the caliber of this movement, which is at least on par with Hublot's best mainstream movement, the Unico series. The standard of finish on the case is definitely a cut above. Everything from the gorgeous, tight tolerances of the conforming strap, which is completely flush to the shoulders of the lugs, likewise to the flanks of the case, the even gloss polish on the flanks of the ceramic bezel, as well as the high-quality screw-retained strap. You can see on both sides, retained with a threaded screw, very impressive. I've often commented that this is the more secure and the more expensive way to join a strap to a case, but again, in fitting with the brand image, this is one of the brands that's managed by Mark Hayek of the Swatch Group's controlling Hayek family, and after his grandfather, Nicholas Hayek, passed away, he inherited control of Jaquet Droz, and he's really run it in that tradition as a flagship brand within Swatch Group. With 5 ATM water resistance, it's a sports watch, but it's not a dive watch. Consider this one splash or shallow weighting only. What it does have, though, is a completely unrepentant sense of modernity about it, and as I mentioned, every element is executed to the highest standard. This is a wonderful, thick and substantial natural vulcanized rubber strap, and you can see the design continuity throughout this. You even have the ridged notches of the ceramic bezel echoed in the design of the flanks of the strap, and moving into the clasp itself, incredibly burly, beautifully finished. Again, this is one example of a high-quality deployant clasp that's fully finished throughout, even on the underside of the buckle. This is why I say Jaquet Droz is definitely in the same spirit of Hublot, but in terms of finish, attention to detail, and execution, it does set itself apart. Even the interiors of the swing arms, the undersides of the buckle, everything is finished to the same standard as the case itself. So this watch represents a different look. It represents an attempt to establish a new tradition, create a new classic. And while the early Grande Seconde watches established the essential layout of a Jaquet Droz watch, the brand didn't hit its stride until 2008 with the sport utility watches, and this SW continues in that tradition. At its peak in the 2000s, Jaquet Droz turned out perhaps 3,500 to 4,000 watches a year. Right now it's sitting at right about 3,000 a year, so you're assured exclusivity. Just by comparison, Breguet makes about 10 times that per year. So if you do choose to purchase this Jaquet Droz Grande Seconde SW on watchyouwant.com, rest assured you have something that almost no one else will. You can see it, and if you like, buy it on our website, watchyouwant.com.